Camera is now on. I'm just fiddling with the settings so I can match up the color. Okay. Oh, Warhammer Lives now. Well, I wish I had the budget those guys had. I could pump into this. Right. Oh, so you you can see me, you can hear me. I think we might have a show, guys. Yeah, same here, Mason. What I'll do, I'll just look every now and again to the chat. If any questions pop up, if any repeated questions pop up, I'll do my best to answer them at the time. Righty. Oh, let's make sure that you can actually see everything. Okay, so I've just zoomed in a touch. Alrighty. Okay, let's put it around to make sure you can see me. Okay, I think we're ready to actually start or pick up where we left off. Okay, so unfortunately you weren't able to actually hear anything I said, but this does present us with an opportunity. There are no mistakes, just happy accidents. I can show you the color palette, the very fetching color palette that we've used. So, as a base coat, I've undercoated the miniature with Vallejo black primer, and then I've given it an overspray of white. You can use whatever white you want or whichever primer you use. Sorry, not the Vallejo, the Scale 75 black. It dries extremely matte, and it's a very nice color to absorb paint, to absorb color. So that's my recommendation for undercoating the miniature. I didn't think it was such a big deal until I moved over to it. I was using Halford's car sprays before this. And then I moved on to the Scale 75, I'm sorry, Scale 75 paint, and it was just such a revelation. There was such a difference in the tones I was able to produce. It dries very, very matte black, and the color, it seems to sink into the surface of the miniature. It's a very, very nice color to use. Okie dokie. So from there, we give an overspray of white. I used Model Mates white primer. Unfortunately, they have gone out of business, Model Mates. So use Games Workshop primer, or whichever primer you prefer. Scale 75 do their own white primer. If it's anything like the black, it's going to be excellent. From there, we had a base mixture of the Vallejo acrylic metal color copper. Now these colors, they can be a touch temperamental, as you can see how they've separated out on my color palette here. But in terms of how small the metallic pigment is, they're unparalleled. You could create some really nice, subtle, thin blends with them. I mixed that up with Forge World's Castellax Bronze. And between the two of them, they created this base layer you can see here. So that's just two very, very thin coat coverage. And as I explained, that you couldn't hear me, we want very, very thin coats of paint. We don't want anything too thick at all, because it just won't be a very pleasing result. So thin layer, it will be quite inconsistent to start with. That's exactly what we want. It'll be splotchy in places, but we don't want anything that is too consistent the first time around. The second layer is where you're going to get that consistency and you get that really nice blend we have going on here. And from there, we start to develop the metal. So you will need a leap of faith. All my students, especially when it comes to painting skin tones and faces, you'll all have to face this. It's going to be it's going to be a leap in faith. It's going to be a big leap in faith, big style, because we'll be adding green and we'll be adding purple to the shadows as our first shadows. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put up in the chat. Just let me know you're still there. Let me know you can still hear me. And it hasn't cut out, or you're just watching a black screen, or God knows what else. And from here, we start to develop the shadows a touch. So you don't have to watch me base coat the miniature from start to finish, thankfully. You can just watch what I do with the shadows. So the shadows, the first shadows, we're going to mix this up with a touch of matte medium. Now, all painting to a certain extent is an exercise in contrast. With metallics, it's no different. We want very, very thin coats, and we want to produce contrast. The beautiful thing with metallics, we can add another layer of contrast on top of our cool, warm balance when it comes to colors, and we can use it in opposition to complementary colors. It's my very roundabout, convoluted way of saying we can add matte to the shadows to fix them in place, and we could put those to contrast with the metallic pigment in the highlights. Okay, let's have a little look at the. Okay, is that clear green or green very diluted? So let's have a look at the palette again. I thankfully, because of you guys, I will be able to upgrade my equipment immediately. I thought it would take a couple of months before I could buy another camera to have it settled over this and have it running alongside the stream. But we've just smashed the first goal immediately. So I am able to upgrade my equipment as soon as the payments for that is made at the end of the month. So I won't be able to. I'll be able to have this permanently on you all the time. I say. So this is Winsor Newton ink Viridian. So you see, it's very, very translucent in tone. I have a touch of Winsor Newton ink orange. That color is scale 75 Elandil violet, and this is Cyberite. I believe it's Cabalite green by Games Workshop. Don't worry so much if you haven't got these exact color equivalents in your stable, guys. Don't worry at all. Just use what you have. It's much better to learn to use what you have. We have gold also on our palette and pale worn metal with a touch of silver. And all these contribute to the highlighting scheme of this. So, Robert, you said the mixture of Vallejo copper and Forge World gold. Did you mix it doing thin coats of one over the other mixed together? So what I'll do is I'll keep this in the background, and you'll be able to see exactly. It will be out of focus because the main focus of the episode, the lesson, will be on the main man himself. But I'll have it in the background so you can see exactly how I mix up the paints. But thanks to you guys, we will be able to upgrade the equipment immediately and have a camera over this all the time. So let's concentrate on the leg. Let's develop some of the shadows and highlights of the leg here. It seems weird saying in the previous episode because you couldn't hear anything, but previously we used the camera as a way of defining where our shadows and highlights should exist. So it's always worth get your camera phone, put the first base layer of metallic down, and see exactly where our shadows and highlights exist on the miniature. So on ours, it runs along here, and we have a highlighted portion up here. And this will just help us decide where to place our shadows and highlights. If you are a touch unfamiliar of exactly how to place lights and shadows in relation to non-metallic metals, just use the official color scheme that Forge World produced as your guide. It's a really, really nicely painted miniature, and the shadows and highlight placements are perfect. So we're going to get some matte medium. You can buy this from most hobby stores or just go online. Thankfully, everything is attainable now because of the online community. I'm going to mix some Cabalite green with some Viridian. Now, the reason why I use an ink is that they're semi-translucent, and you can modulate exactly how much translucency, I think that's a word, we have existing with the miniature. So if you want our shadows to be slightly more translucent and we can see a bit more of the underlying layer, we use more ink. So when we apply this to the surface, It's very, very thin, frustratingly thin at first. So we want, if you can see the movement of the paintbrush, I'm moving the paint to where I want it to exist. So I'm moving it to where the shadow, I want the shadow to be. Okay. Same again here. So wherever I want the shadow to be, I'll be moving this green. So why green? Why the hell are we using green? Well, the green will neutralize the warm tones that exist in the base tone. So we've used bronze as our base color. So it's quite a warm color. There's a lot of red in it, there's a lot of yellow. Overall, it's quite a warm, inviting color. By using green, we're neutralizing the cool tones. And when we add another filter layer on top of this, we're going to continue this development of the shadows. When we use black, or when we use Argax Earthshade, Liquid Talent from Games Workshop, say, it only gives it so much shadow. When we start overlapping colors in this method, it deepens our shadows and it complicates the scheme. You see how thin the paints are. Think of them like watercolor paints. I tell my new students, you want them to be frustratingly thin. When you apply the first layer, you're going to wonder why you even bothered, because there's going to be absolutely no tonal change or no tonal shift, or hardly any. Then when you put the second layer on, it starts to take off. Okay, let's have a look at the leg here. So there's a touch of shadow here. I can very roughly just sketch in. I want my shadows and highlights to be. It's a bit of a weird practice because I'm actually looking at my monitor as I paint the miniature. I wouldn't advise this, but try it. So with this green stage, I'm just roughly sketching in wherever my shadows will be. I'm not too concerned over the how to put it, over the smoothness of the blend. Not concerned about that whatsoever at this stage, because the subsequent layers will smooth it out when we do add more washes, more filter layers, and more metallics over the top. Okay, so is anybody painting anything exciting at the moment? Has anybody picked up the Crimson King? Anybody painting anything metallic? Because these techniques can be applied to a whole heap of different miniatures. Well, anything you paint metallic. Oh, so I should run through the reasoning of exactly why I'm painting this metallic rather than non-metallic. There will be, I'm not decided yet whether it'll be a video or whether it will be a PDF. It might be both. Detailing the non-metallic color scheme for Magnus, akin to the Games Workshop official version. The reason why I'm using true metallic to start with now is that I think it's a bit more in keeping with the tone of the Horus Heresy, the miniatures so far, that very ultra highly realistic universe. So that's why I'm going with true metallic at first, with my first version. I think true metallic leads itself more to realistic tones, but it's very hard to photograph. So Robert, what are you working on? Oh, Custodes. Okay, these are perfect for you then. This is absolutely ideal. So I can show you something really cool you can do with your Custodes, something that detailed up here. But you have your Custodes, or you have a miniature that is very highly detailed, like this one. And it might take hours to get in all the little nooks and crannies. You could do a little technique, saves you a whole heap of time, which I could demonstrate on here. So lots of detail, take hours to get into it. What's the cheat here? I hate this term, but what's the life hack? Well, the trick here is to break the surface tension of the miniature. So you use gloss varnish or something similar, something with a high shine coating on it to break the surface tension, which makes paint more predictable in where it flows. So again, I'm overcomplicating things with language. Let's get in with some Forge World Clear Medium. I'm just going to coat this over the entire surface. So let's do it here when it's going to be slightly more, it's going to be easier to see. Okay, so I'm just going to put this over the entire surface of the miniature, and it dries clear. So we're not going to interrupt what we've developed so far. I'm going to allow it to dry a couple of seconds. Then with our Viridian, a touch of Carbolite, and a lot of water, I'm going to create a wash. What I'm going to do is just use this at the top, and hopefully you can see it running into all those little gaps. So by breaking the surface tension of the miniature, we are making the paint a lot more predictable and where we can move. By adding that Forge World medium over the top and then watering our wash down and touching at the top, it will run into all the gaps, into all the shadows. Let's try it again down below. So with the custodies, I know there's a lot of filigree, there's a lot of detail. My co-host, Mark, on the Age of Darkness podcast, he had a bit of trouble doing this, and it's such a hard thing to explain or to write down. But actually seeing it in person, it's easy when you see it in person. So I'm just going to dot this in some place and just allow the paint to run to all those gaps. Voila, instant shading. So I'm going to hit this with a hairdryer, so please excuse the ear bleeding noise you're about to hear, but I guess hearing anything is a bit of a treat at this stage. Excellent, we've got 14 guys watching. Please introduce yourself. Say hello in the comment section. Again, I'm awfully sorry about the last attempt at this video that didn't pick up any of the very funny jokes and witticisms I was giving out in the last episode. Last episode, should call it episodes in the last seminar. Please feel free to introduce yourself and say what you're working on. So this true metallics can be used across a whole range. So with Robert, for example, instead of using a base tone of bronze, use a slightly more heroic base tone, say a royal gold by Darkstar Paints, or whatever gold you want a base tone to be, and you apply exactly the same layers. You apply exactly the same green and purple in the same amounts. Nothing changes. Just the base layer will determine exactly the overall appearance of it. So what am I doing here? I've taken purple, so Lendil Violet with some violet ink from scale 75. And this is going in my darkest shadows. So the green is there to just sketch out the mid-tone shadows. This purple helps define the miniature. This, we're almost using it like like blacklining. So for those long enough in the tooth, you can remember Paul Sawyer's White Scars Army. That beautiful white that he edge highlighted. Sorry, he used a black pen, a very fine micro pen, to do these details like I'm doing now, very, very carefully. And the purple is going to be our darkest shadows. So I'm just manipulating. As you can see, that's really defined the armor plates. When you move it around, the shadows are locked in place, even though the highlights are moving around. Ah, brilliant stuff. Okay, we have a lot more people on here now. Okay, so we have Sacrament of Carnage. Hi, working on some Blood Angel Scouts. Oh, great. Yeah, Blood Angels are very much my legion. We have Stig, working on some White Scars bikes. Oh, cool. So if you could track down the old article of Paul Sawyer's, I mean, those are, in my mind, the archetypical White Scars force, but they are 40k, and they were painted in the early 2000s, so it's weird to think how much painting has moved on since then. Any tips for improving brush control? Okay, so brush control, it really does come down to muscle memory. The more you paint, the better you'll become at it. Sorry, excuse me, I have terrible hay fever at the moment, so I have to do a horrible habit of getting rid of. Anyway, okay, so better brush control. Always helps to have a good brush. I'm using the Winsor & Newton Series 7. They cost a little bit more, but if you take care of them, they last longer, and they do come to a very, very fine tip, as you can see here. And it all comes down to muscle memory. Other tips I could give you, make sure your resting hand is actually, so my resting hand is against the table. It helps with the focus of the camera, and it also helps me keep the model held. Another good tip is to actually mount your models on something to give you a comfortable grip, and you can use both hands to control where the miniature is or where you're placing your lines. So as you can see, that's a rock solid formation we have here. It's not going to move much. And I don't move my hand, but I move my fingers. Any paintbrush that comes to a very good fine point, a very fine tip, I would recommend. So Winsor & Newton are unparalleled. They tend to be the best of the best, but anything that is Kolinsky hair or genuine hair, any artificial brushes, they do tend to splay very quickly, or they haven't got the barrel of a Winsor & Newton. Okay, so Bing. Oh, hi, Ben. Welcome from Montreal, working on some Kado Jack's War Machine. Awesome stuff. So you could be able to transfer this metallics. Oh, something I want to ask you guys. So during these seminar courses, the original intention was to paint a portion of the armor demonstrating this technique. Then in my own time, I'd go off, I'd finish off the rest of the armor plates, I'd come back and we'd work on another section. So this tutorial, this seminar is how to deal with true metallics for Magnus the Red. And you'll be able to apply these skills to other miniatures, or more specifically this miniature, if you wanted to do like a paint along. But would you prefer to watch me paint every single piece of this miniature? So instead of going off in my spare time and finishing off the miniature, would you prefer to watch every single gory detail, every single line of how I put it down? We build it up then over the weeks, and we can release this as a separate video in and of itself. Whichever you prefer to do, I'm happy to do. So my worry would be over several weeks, it may be a touch boring, just coming back to, oh, Magnus again. Oh, yeah, okay. What are we doing this week? Oh, we're painting his one and only eye. Oh, okay, cool. I'm a bit sick of Magnus now. So the purple is the deepest portion of the armor, and it will look very unusual when you finished. It will look very, very unusual, but don't be discouraged. Don't worry. When we apply filter layers over the top of this, it's going to recede into the background. So just add a touch of green here, let's add a touch of violet. In depth, okay? Prefer to watch everything, okay? You get everything, guys. Move into different parts, okay? Okay, we'll do every single little piece then. Oh, well, I'll tell you what, we could come up with a compromise. So what I can do in my spare time, I can film myself paint this. I'll make sure that you can hear me. I'll edit this into a more of a comprehensive video and release it alongside. So we'll be doing the tutorials, or the seminars rather, fortnightly. Just covering details like this, like the leg, that I could go on and film in my own time and just release it somewhere down the line. But for this miniature, until this process really evolves into something, I will paint every single line in front of you, gentlemen. So if you did come to paint this miniature, you can see exactly where I place the highlights, shadows, and everything. So as you can see, it's becoming very, very developed at a very early stage. So as you can see how I'm manipulating the brush, I'm moving the pigment to where I want it to sit. I'm moving the pigment to the shadow. In this case, I'm pushing it to where I want it to exist. How do I paint without leaving watermarks and paints? So the trick is we want thin paints, but we don't want watery paints. It's a very, very big difference between the two. It helps having a piece of tissue paper to hand. I can't put it on this surface because the paint will unfortunately sink into it. But just off camera, I'm wiping off the brush. Or if you can see, I'll demonstrate on here. So this masking tape is semi-absorbent. And I'll just knock off any excess moisture, leaving the pigment on the brush. Because we want thin paints, but we don't want watery paints. So like I say, guys, I want to thank you so much for supporting me in this. It means so much to be, well, quite frankly, to be scarily so successful in the first 24 hours. We practically made, well, we did in the first 24 hours. We smashed through the first stretch goal of improving the camera equipment. So as far as live streaming goes, we will be using this setup. But as far as actually videoing independent videos, that's going to be in much higher quality now already. I thought I'd have a couple of months just to do a bit of research and find the best equipment, but nope, we're going straight in. The whole intention with this isn't so much to show off, it's more to provide a teaching platform for you guys, to provide what will be a comprehensive painting A to Z that you'll be able to take on. You'll be able to transfer these skills, the skills you learn, into your own painting process. The last thing I want to do is for you to imitate me in any way. This is just how I do things. I want you to take and adapt these lessons and develop your own voice. I want you to develop your own painting technique. Hopefully at the end of this, you won't need me whatsoever. You will rely on your own judgment, your own skills. Probably not the best sales technique. After these courses, you won't need this at all. But that's the intention. I am giving you the fishing rod, not the fish. Thank you, Mason. Those knights turned out really well. I painted for you. I'm so happy with them. It took a little bit longer than I originally intended, but by a couple of days, I think it was. But I just couldn't help myself when I get so involved in a project like that. So as you can see with the green, very thin washes, just establishing the shadows. Again, I am moving I'm moving the paint into the shadows. And, something I got. So your new best friend, steal it from your girlfriend. If you have 80s glamour style hair, glamour rock style hair, you'll have one of these already. Hair dry. In between every session, in between every layer, it would be worth hitting it with a hairdryer, because acrylic paint is a touch deceptive. You think it's settled on a surface, and when you apply another color on top, it's still slightly wet underneath, and it kind of infects the layer you put on the top, and it just ends up an indistinct mess. So in between every layer, hit it with a hairdryer. That ensures that each layer is dry before moving on. Build up another layer, and then you build up layer upon layer upon layer. And I guarantee you guys, it's going to be so frustrating to start with, because the thinness of the paints, you'll wonder why you ever bothered applying that layer when this just made no difference whatsoever. But it does build up. Another thing we need to consider when painting this miniature is exactly where the rest of the components are going to sit in relation with the shadows and highlights. So I know that the cloak will be flowing out the back. So this portion of the armor is going to be mainly in darkness. His arms stretch out here with a khopesh, and his arms sprint out there. So the shadows and highlights, they're roughly going to be the same. However, I'm going to manipulate them here. It is always worth assembling the miniature before you put your final highlights, just to make sure that the final highlight placement is correct, and that it doesn't just look weird when you finish it. Okay, so we've established our shadows, we've established our highlights on his leg. I couldn't think of the word for leg then. What I was going to say? On his down arm. On his arm, on his pelvis. That was weird. Okay. So purple. Sorry. So wondering why I couldn't think of the word leg. Let's go on to the purple. So again, with the purple, we're using this to help define the miniature. So whereas the green is more of a generalized shadow, this is a much more specific targeted shadow. Don't forget, guys, as a thank you for signing up for being my patrons in the first month, I will be giving away a painted Primark of your choosing. So the details of that will be announced through the Patreon page very, very soon. I should get on it after this lesson. And I will also be putting up on Facebook as well. So please feel free to share it with your friends, family, loved ones, even those people who can give a damn about Warhammer and wondering why the hell you spending so much money on children's toys. Share and share away. We might make a few converts along the way. It's getting very, very concentrated. Shadow. Okay. So I may paint these parts turquoise just for contrast. I know I want to do something with these hieroglyphs, but I'm not sure what at this point, so I'm just going to leave them as they are. I bought a Thunderhawk Warhammer vest. I didn't tell my spouse how much it cost, so shh. It's going to be a secret just between me and you, me and us. Okay, so what are we doing now? First highlights. Let's go on to our first highlights. So I'm mixing gold, Vallejo gold, with our base mixture. So as you can see, our base mixture is just kind of developed into this indistinct gloop in the middle. But no need to worry. We know what our base tone was because we applied it by adding gold. It's a very light gold. It's very silvery gold. In effect, we're desaturating the color. So we're adding essentially white into the base color for our highlight. We can do something really, really funky here. Just take pure silver and we start to plot out our highlights. So the very highest highlight will be running along the edge here. So just with pure silver. It's very abrupt, this highlight. Very, very abrupt. You may not be able to see it very clearly through the camera, but in person, it's stark, the highlight. I just want to establish the highlights. And with true metallics, it's not always where you may expect it to be. So you may expect it to conform to the highlighting scheme we've established with our last layer and apply the lights along the very edge for here. But no, if you look at the camera, you can see it actually run a little farther back. So that's what we're going to establish our highlight. I'm going to carry on with this, just establishing the very highest highlight. We're being very stark, we're being very abrupt with this. What we can do later on, because of the thinness of the pigment, we can apply gold over the top of this, almost as a filter layer. So a filter layer is a layer we place on top of another layer uh, to mess with the underlying hue. It's a bit like a wash. We think when Games Workshop tells you to wash the surface of a miniature, that's what they mean. It's a filter layer. Okay, so let's look at where the shadows and highlights will be here. And if there are any portions of the armor you don't quite like where you've put your shadows, now's the time to correct it. Yes, Mason, the Thunderhawk was for myself. And you will be seeing a lot of tutorials on that, how to paint larger vehicles, because there's a slightly different painting process, a slightly different mentality you need to take to painting miniatures in this scale. Let's have a look at where our highlights will be. Yeah, Robert, I can't disagree with you there. The 12-year-old child in me still wants the old metal kit they produced years ago. I turned up on the day, and when I saw it was painting those gorgeous Blood Angel colours, I knew I was in trouble. I was the very first person to buy one in the world. That's my small claim to fame. I got the designer to sign the box as well. Okay, so I'm just, in fact, I'm almost edge highlighting tags here so we can see exactly where the highlight will be. I don't want to put pure, actually, yeah, let's put a bit of pure silver. Let's mix up with some pale burnt metal. I'm just going to line this down here. So I want to move the brush up towards the highlight. Again, manipulating the pigment where we want it to sit. It's a very slight transition, actually moving it up to where we want it to sit, but it helps with the highlighting scheme. It's important you need to pick one point of reference. So when we move it about, you'll see the highlighted layer is going to be here, but we don't want to start highlighting from this portion from where we were. We started highlighting from this portion, so we need to follow that. So light along here, along here. Yeah, Robert. What legion are you going to paint it up as? Your Mastodon? I believe you booked in for a one-to-one course anyway, so we can do it during that if you like. That was one of the inspirations behind creating these courses, because I know a lot of people out there. I'm the same. I'm intimidated by Forge World miniatures all the time, but I still want to paint them. So by offering these courses, offering these lessons, hopefully it'll embolden you a touch more to explore the miniatures you've bought. Okay, so with this scheme, I want to draw the light more towards this. So I've got a touch of gold, very, very thin gold layer, very, very thin. I'm just moving the paint to where I want it to sit. Oh god, metallic pink. Okay, that's going to be a hell of a challenge if you decide that. So I'm just going to finish off the feet where the highlights are going to be. Okay, finish there with the highlighting. So unlike traditional painting techniques where you work up through the mid-tone to a gradual highlight into the very highest highlight, we're going straight in. We've been a bull in a china shop, going straight in to our highest highlights, and then we're going to create a wash, almost a wash with our metallics. Okay, and then so using our base tone with gold, say 50-50, I'm just going to run that from the mid-tone over our highlight. It's going to knock the highlight back. It's going to draw our mid-tone into the highlight. So you can see how I just knocked off any spare moisture from the brush. Okay, let's grab some more gold, a base tone, and over the surface, and I want to. So acrylic pigments or acrylic paint stays a lot. It stays workable for a lot longer than you may originally feel. So you can manipulate it on the surface If you want an example of this, just load up your brush with some water and some metallic and run it along your fingernail, and you can see all the metallic pigment moving about in that solution in the water. Now, if you can think of your acrylic paint being exactly the same, only the grinding is so minute you're unable to see those pigments move in the watery solution. Remains usable for longer. And we're just establishing more of a subtle blending scheme here rather than the very harsh transitions we built up. So I'll go a bit longer. I'll go a bit longer in this seminar just to make up for last time. Okay. I also want to show you how to develop this leg properly. Turn from a chest day into a leg day. So I'm just checking out the shadows and reflections here. Yeah, it's good. Okay. Right, where do you go from here? So I just want to add a touch more gold. Move that in. That's as far as I want the highlight to go. Don't get any brighter than the steel we used. So I use a bit of pale burnt metal. I'm just moving between these three colors now to define exact. So I'm going with a bit more gold. It's a bit more freeform in the highlighting scheme. Just go with your instinct. And when it comes to establishing tones and highlights like this, it's always best if you work from real life. So just try and find as many different examples of real metallic color you can. Look at them for as long as you can stand it. Go to bed, go to sleep or something. In the morning, all that information is there, and you'll be able to use it creatively. I don't remember who said it, but whenever you want to find the solution to a problem, think about it really, really hard, then completely forget about it, and the solution will present itself. So will it undo the step we just done below? So this is probably the best example there. No, it won't undo the green step we done, because the paints we're using are so thin that there will be a slight inflection from the green. So when we move in the color into the midtone, into the highlight, there will be some residue of the green left over. Okay, let's grab some orange ink now. Let's start manipulating the tone even more. So moving from, so let's have a look at where the shadows and highlights will be. Okay, so I want a bit more saturated color here. So as you can see, I'm moving this into the shadow, and like Mason picked up, will this interrupt the green stage? It will slightly, but what you'll find is the green interacts very unusually with the orange. So green being a cool tone and the orange being a warm tone, the two will neutralize each other where they meet, creating a darker shadow. And the overlap is going to create a very, very pleasing all over effect with the metallics. When we do come on to color theory, which I'll be administering to qualifying patrons, with the individualized lessons, the color theory course, you're going to learn why exactly we're using the colors we are using. So as you can see, when we move the color around now, the shadows are locked in place. They don't move with the metallic. Oh, thank you so much, Ollie. I'm glad you're getting a lot from this. I'm very aware during these lessons that I do bombard you with a lot of new stuff, and some of it may even feel contradictory. Um, Purely because it's just such an. They may be very, very new disciplines for you to pick up. Um, say with the color theory, using cool and light tones, for example, you may not even thought of using or manipulating color in that manner, or using matte medium with metallic paints. But these small little pointers I can give you will have a dramatic effect on your own paint work. I am very aware I do throw a lot at you during the first lessons. So if there's anything you'd like me to re-explain, go over, please let me know, because don't feel like you need to get. It's taken me years to get to even this very basic understanding of color theory, for example. I'm by no means a master. And color theory is one of those lessons. New things are being developed every day. Our understanding of color and how we perceive it in the spectrum is practically changing every day. So whatever we may think color theory may be today, it could just all be thrown out tomorrow, for all we know. Bare practices, bare knowledge. Oh yeah, thank you, Robert. Yeah, that was the intention with these lessons, because I do get touch frustrated. I move my hands a lot doing the podcast, or when you write a PDF tutorial, for example, there's only so much space and there's only so much you can really cover in there. I mean, you may see how I manipulate a brush on this palette, and there may just be a little flick or a little bit of this or that that just won't be explained otherwise, or something that I wouldn't consciously think of to explain. But by watching and asking questions, especially, I can't tell you how invaluable your guys asking me questions is to help everybody else. So, we're going to Argax Earthshade now. You didn't think we were going this entire lesson without using some liquid talent, did you? So, Argax Earthshade, going to develop those shadows just a touch more. And it won't, so it will obscure the green somewhat. It's going to push that green back ever further into the shadow. What that means, you don't lose the green entirely, not at all. You don't lose it. It just gets pushed back into the background. And it creates a darker shadow, creates a richer shadow. It creates a shadow that is interesting to the eye. We're not just overlapping, we're not just blasting the miniature with Argax Earthshade. So having said that, let's blast this bit with our access shade because this is going to be primarily in darkness. So when you apply Argax Earth Shade over the entirety of the surface, when it dries, it's going to matte the entire area, which isn't appropriate for our highlighted areas. We don't want to add an entire layer over it because once it dries, we lose the metallic effect and we'll have to do a thing called juicing. So we'll have to reapply our metallic color to give that metallic shine back. I find it to be a bit of a nuisance, so I'm a bit more targeted when I apply the Argax rather. Okay. Okay. Hit this with a hairdryer. Okay, and that is where we left off the last with the last video that unfortunately didn't record any sound. But so this is where we left it. So I can already see points I want to develop further, like down here. I think that's pretty much it for that area. And I'll probably do a bit more redefining of the armor plates once I've attached the arms and the rest of the miniature. So as far as the metallics go for this lesson, or this portion of it, I'm pretty happy there. But for the rest, so we could do something really interesting with Magnus's armor, especially for a normal metallic work. I'd pretty much leave it where it was. So if you're doing like Sanguinary Guard, for example, use a different base layer, use a more heroic base layer, and then you just apply these exact same layers over the top. So the base layer you're mixing in with gold, and then it'll touch more of pale burnt metal and silver. Oh, I think my voice is going to go. Okay. But we could do something a bit more unusual with this guy's armor. So this is something I didn't show you in the last video. Okay. How easy to apply these techniques over an entire army. So these techniques I'm showing you here, they are mainly reserved for single piece miniatures. So your collector's pieces, your characters, your Primarchs. It's taken me an hour to paint that guy's leg, but I have been talking, I have been explaining things. I haven't been concentrating on it wholly. I haven't been devoted to it wholly. I think you could do the entirety of the arm in about an hour and a half if it was just you and you knew exactly what you were doing, if you knew where to place the placements of the shadows and highlights. So use the official material to plot out the highlights and the shadows, because the guys at Forge World have done such a wonderful job with AO1, and it'll give you a guide on how to paint yours, where to put the color placements. You can easily get all the armor plates done in an hour and a half. Across an entire range of miniatures, say if you're painting a Sanguinary Guard army, it's much easier to paint this with an airbrush. You could get, so the models aren't as detailed. There's a lot more blank armor plates, and you could develop the tones very easily with an airbrush. It's a little bit different applying these techniques to Magnus, where there are a lot of overlapping armor plates, and say a Space Marine force where there's much more flat, open armor. I'd advise you to use an airbrush on an army-wide scale because you're able to produce these tones a lot quicker over a greater range of miniatures. But these techniques have been applied across my Blood Angels, and my Blood Angels have been painted in my spare time on top of the commission work I do. So it is very much possible. A reasonable time frame, it depends on the size of the army. Perfectly honest. Custodes, if you could dedicate a week to it, I mean, a full working week, I think you could get a 2,000, 3,000 point force done. And we will be covering Custodes in later lessons. I have I have lessons very much planned for that. I have the miniatures just ready and raring to go, but I wanted to start with something extra special for these seminar lessons. So what am I doing? You may have seen me very sneakily put some Adriatic blue. It's a very nice turquoise color by scale 75. Because we'll be using turquoise in quite a lot of this miniature, we could create some fading effects with the armor. So I'm getting my matte medium. So the matte medium you may see here is a bit of a gel. It's not ideal for our purposes. Mix it with a touch of water, it'll be okay. But buy the stuff from Vallejo. It comes in a little bottle, and it's more liquid. I'm just going to mix that with a touch of Viridian, because that the Viridian ink. So this is the first time I'm using Winsor & Newton inks. I bought them this morning, couldn't resist. So what better way of trying something out for the first time than on a live video stream on my very first seminar. So let's mix these up. What we can do. So this is our final finishing technique. So I'm just going to, if you can see how I'm holding the brush, or how I attack the surface with my brush. It's very, very thin. I'm not going in very smooth, sweeping motions. I'm using the brush and I'm stabbing it, the surface. And this is meant to show some corrosion in the armor plates, in the shadows. So all along here, there's going to be turquoise. These are going to be turquoise gems. So we are mirroring the turquoise scheme found elsewhere in the miniature on the armor plates. And it's a very, very subtle blend. I want to do this. So any armor plates you feel like might be lost in detail. So I need to refine these plates a touch more. I need to decide exactly what I want to be gold and what I don't want to be. But this is more of a finishing technique. I can apply this. So you can see if when it dries. I'm not sure how well it's come up on the camera. But it's a very, very subtle, slight turquoise hint to this. It's matte as well. And when we apply that to the rest of the surfaces of the miniature, it's just going to make a nice cohesive whole with the rest. So matte medium. The reason why we're placing matte medium in with this is specifically to create a contrast with the metallic colors. Metallic colors, they can be quite difficult to photograph. So when you see here, you can see, even though we've used matte medium in the shadows here, you can still see some of the underlying color. So we add matte medium in with our ink and in with our washes. It's going to matte the underlying layer down as well as making our shadow. It's a way of fixing our shadows in place. And it creates contrast between the metallic highlight and the matte finished shadows, and it locks those shadows in place. So when you're moving it around, you can see the metallic pigments really picking up on the highlight, but not so much with our shadow there. So it's just a way of producing contrast. Rightio, guys, so that's all I wanted to finish for this seminar. I've left half an hour for us just to chat. If you want to ask any questions, any and all things, feel free to fire them away. Any other techniques you want me to demonstrate on the fly, just ask away. If there's any burning issues you want me to address, please feel free to hit me up. I'm going to be here for an extra half an hour, or if you just want to see me continue, I'll probably just potter on with this for the rest of the half an hour if nothing comes up. But if you want me to address something, please feel free. How do you make your own wet palette? Okay, so how to make a wet palette. I use baking parchment. So baking parchment, it can be a bit of a difficulty to find. It's called different things in different countries. You can find some in this country, in the UK. Oh God, where can you find it? Marks and Spencers, in some of the bigger Tesco's, but not all of them. Waitrose especially sells it. Waitrose, you'll find it easily enough. Marks and Spencers sell it, as well as cooperative, and it comes like this roll here. Baking parchment is semi-permeable material, so what that means is just lets a small amount of moisture through the surface. And you take any kind of sponge surface. You can use kitchen roll. I use these. I'm not sure what these are called. Like these towelettes, but they're made of a fabric, so you could just keep using them again and again and again. I have bought oh gosh, what's this called? Like a Tupperware container, and I've used the lid for this. I use a smaller one for these demonstration classes because it's more convenient. But my usual one is, J-cloth. That's right, Robert. So my usual one is a Ferrero Rocher tin or container. Oh God, that's mold. Okay, I'll need to throw that away. Okay, it was a Ferrero Rocher container. You can tell how long it's been before I used that. The handy thing with these is you could put the container on top, strap these together, and boom, the paint remains wet for a couple of days. So if you're working with a specific color balance or a palette, it just makes the paint usable for longer, and also helps us with consistency of our paint. So when you put it on a palette, on a plastic palette, they dry out quicker, and you aren't able to manipulate the consistency of the paint like you are on this palette. Okay, Ben, random question. Do you ever use white and black, or almost strictly colors? So I use black and white all the time. Yep. So with this, you've seen me use an overlapping, complementary colors to produce shadow. That's not a hard and fast rule using that. So when it comes to red, for example, I wouldn't use green as the base tone or the underlayer or to shade red, because when you use complementary colors, it actually, using complementary colors in perfect union with one another produces gray, and we don't want that. What we do want, however, is a rich, lively shadow. So with red, just knocked the camera. So let's have a look at red as an example. We have a Custodes miniature here I'm working on for myself. So in the shadows, I've used purple. I've moved up through a tone of red to almost a skin color for the highlight. And then I've reapplied my base tone over the top of that to knock that skin tone back into the mid-tone. So using purple in shadows of red is a lot better than using green, our complementary color. I do use black to modulate what's called the value. So for those patrons who do qualify for the lessons, go through my color theory lesson. It's invaluable.